Hello, everyone. I have a very big pleasure to welcome you to Climate Recon 2050 event, Getting to Net Zero in the Visegrád countries event. And today we'll have a closer look on the long-term strategies adopted in Poland, Czechia, Hungary, and Slovakia. And I'm joined today by Ewa Iwaszuk, Krzysztof Kobyłka, Michał Danielka, Stelios Grafakos, and Katerina Hajdjakova. And I will now, my name is Wojciech Lewandowski. I'm from Warsaw Institute of Economic and European Studies, Visa Europa. Now I will be very grateful for Eva to present a little bit more about the project and introduce you to the topic of our today discussion.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Wojciech, and welcome to all of you. My name is Ewa Iwaszuk. I work for the Ecologic Institute in Berlin. And today I have the great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Climate Recon 2050 project and platform. Since 2017, we have been providing a forum for exchange between the experts in the EU member states on their respective experience in developing long-term climate strategies. So we have been in those 4 years organizing workshops for the community of experts directly involved in developing national strategies. And we have also been organizing public outreach events like the webinar today, where we are sharing the insights that we are gaining from this community of experts, as well as from the research and analysis that we conduct in the project. So one of our key insights from 4 years of this work is that there is a tremendous diversity among EU countries when it comes to both the process of developing the long-term strategies, as well as the outcome. So how the final strategies look like, or for example, how they're embedded in the national climate governance frameworks. And given this diversity, we believe that there is a much added value in continuing to create the space for dialogue and for exchange to work towards common understanding and alignment of long-term climate policy in the EU member states. Can I please ask for the next slide? So just for a little bit of context, many of you will be aware that at the very end of 2018, the EU member states have actually been obliged to develop and submit their national long-term climate strategy by the deadline of 1st of January 2020. Now some of the countries have actually started developing the strategies and published them, starting in like mid-2010s, and have since revised their strategies. And as of today, 22 strategies have been developed and submitted to the European Commission, with 5 still to be published. Those are the ones of Bulgaria, Cyprus, Ireland, Poland, and Romania. Can I please have the next slide? Well, what is quite interesting is that since that moment in late 2018, when the countries were asked to start developing their long-term strategies, the EU has revised and updated upwards its own long-term targets, so the target for the entire bloc, of course, to climate neutrality by 2050, as you're well aware, a target which is now embedded in law by means of the EU climate law. So that created quite a complex dynamic for the member states developing the strategies, because while they were developing the strategies, the EU has been in the talks to develop to update the target. So many of the national teams have been working against this moving target, had to go back to the drawing board to revise their modeling, update the targets, or there were some countries that were in a position that they have published the strategy and had to immediately start working on a new one because the domestic target has been since changed to correspond better to the newly updated EU target. So I think that's quite interesting and relevant to be aware of this quite dynamic complex in which those strategies are coming to life. Next slide, please. Most recently, the importance of the national climate strategies have been recognized also at the international level at COP26. I think if you click on the slide, there's like the more information on the slide. Yes, exactly. You can click all the 4 of them. So first of all, the parties have already been obliged to communicate their long-term strategies with the Paris Agreement, but now at COP26, they have been urged to indeed develop and submit those strategies by the next COP, so by later this year. Importantly, it was also highlighted that the strategies should be regularly updated based on new information, new science that is coming up. So developing it once is not, the end of the job. And also, quite importantly, the Glasgow decision highlighted the importance of aligning the short and mid-term goals to making with the long-term strategies, making sure that those short and mid-term goals are actually informed by the long-term strategies, because we're talking not just about the targets, about the pathway, and ensuring that, first of all, this pathway is realistic, is feasible to achieve those long-term targets. But we're also, of course, talking about, what's the area under the curve. So how do we get to the final target with what pathway? Next slide, please. Given this, we believe that national long-term climate strategies remain very relevant policy items. Those are the documents that will guide our transition to low carbon, zero carbon economies and societies. So they're absolutely crucial. A transformation that we have to achieve at the very latest by mid-century. Therefore, we are extremely grateful for the support that we received to be able to continue this work, first and foremost to the European Climate Initiative of the German Ministry of Environment, as well as to the European Climate Foundation. I also wanted to highlight that this project is being developed by an excellent consortium of partners. We have with us the Polish think tank Wise Europa that is co-hosting with us this webinar today, the Tallinn office of the Stockholm Environment Institute, the Energy Policy Group based in Bucharest, as well as the Slovenian Jožef Stefan Institute. So the analysis that we're presenting today, the analysis of the long-term strategies of the Visegrád group countries is first of a series. This year we'll publish and present in such webinars also a comparison of strategies of the Baltic countries, the Eastern Balkans, Romania and Bulgaria, as well as strategies of Croatia, Austria, and Slovenia. Therefore, I very much warmly invite you to follow us on Twitter at EU Climate Policy, check out our website where you can actually find the analysis that we're presenting today, climatedialogue.eu. And I invite you to stay connected. And now, without further ado, I will pass on the virtual mic back to your moderator for today, Wojciech Lewandowski. Wojciech, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eva, for presenting the context of today's discussion and the main information about the project itself. I will guide you through the agenda for our today's meeting. So after the welcome, we will have the presentation of Krzysztof Kobylka, who will present the report and the main conclusions coming from the analysis conducted by the researchers. Then I would warmly invite you to participate in our panel discussion and with the attendance of our speakers. Unfortunately, Ms. Director Marlena Tryka could not join us today, but we will be joined by excellent speakers in person of Michał Danielka, Stelios Grafakos, and Katerina Hajdiakova. And then there will be also some time for for the Q&A session, which you can make the use of the tool Q&A in the Zoom to ask questions and also to send likes to the questions that you would prefer to be answered the most. So then we would have the opportunity to see which questions are the most relevant for the discussion, most interesting for the participants. Then also please remember to use chats for any comments. And we also inform you that the discussion is being recorded and it will be made available online at the webpage of the project afterwards. I guess this is the basic information that we need for now. And I will be very happy to give the floor to Krzysztof and his presentation. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you all the very pleasant time listening to Krzysztof and then the discussion.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. Just let me share the screen. Is it available for everyone in full screen? Yeah. So, hello everyone. My name is Krzysztof Kobyłka, and I'm a co-author of this report on long-term strategies of Visegrád group countries. I did this report along with Kamil Laskowski and Aleksander Śniegocki. And thank you very much also from contribution from Matthias and Jonathan from Ecologic, which reviewed the report. And it's very nice to see you all here today, and I'm looking forward for discussion later also. So firstly, who we are the independent think tank based in Warsaw. We are focusing on these research areas, but basically more and more on energy, climate and environment topics. This is what Eva already said, so I will not focus that much on it. But yes, we are implementing this together with Ecologic, Energy Policy Group, Joseph Stefan Institute, SEI, and us. And we are going to prepare the 4 assessments like this. So and the EPG is going to cover Romania and Bulgaria. SEI will cover Baltic countries, and Joseph Stefan Institute will cover Slovenia, Croatia, and Austria. So I am inviting you to see more info on the project website, and looking forward to the other analysis. So going to the assessment itself, we have assessment of Visegrád group countries, which is, as many of you know, Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. Our general aim of this analysis was to support the process of preparation of updates of long-term strategies. So we were trying to map the cross-cutting issues that are all over throughout the long-term strategies, and we prepared a set of recommendations which should be included in the update. Like Eva also said, long-term strategy is an economy-wide low-carbon strategy with the perspective of 30 years ahead from now. And it's what should cover, it's laid out in chapter 3, more specifically on article 15 and the annex 4 of the governance regulation. So how did we approach the assessment? Basically, we took the framework which is laid out in the annex 4 of the regulation and extended with categories which we found also important, such as carbon removal technologies or governance or distributive impacts. So for general, we just review the general informations, how if the countries stick to the framework laid out in the governance regulation, if the document presents up-to-date analysis and so on. For the targets, we focus on the main goals, objectives, or mainly indicators, high-level indicators, namely greenhouse gas emission reduction, renewable energy share, and energy efficiency improvement. We also take a look on these 7 distinguished specific sectors. And for the financing and enable policies and measures, we try to see if the investment needs are mapped for the long-term strategy. Is there any financing to finance them? And is there any plan for the research and development and innovation? We also take a closer look for the socioeconomic impacts and distributive impacts of the transformations. And last but not least, strategy preparation and implementations. So what analytical tools were used, what is the domestic governance, and if there was any public consultation, and what was the involvement of the public in the process. So for each category, we assign the score based on this 3-point scale, where obviously it's a 3-point scale, so all of them are kind of a spectrum, and 3 goes from not perfect, but a good point of reference to for a few future updates, up to the ideal one. The second middle one is the means that the category was taken into account, but missing some important stuff. And 1 means that the subcategory was not taken into account or it is very modest, disparate in the document, or really just mentioned, but not really taken care of. So I will just go through all of these main categories along with the scoreboard and highlight the key findings we found. So as many of you may already know, the regulation put less emphasis on LTS compared to national climate plans. And it comes from the unspecific framework, which is only 1 page compared to 11 for NECP. There is also less governance from EC side, so there is no evaluation or the assessment of the implementation of long-term strategies. And this also resulted in different approaches in terms of shape of the documents and their level of details. But luckily for Visegrád group countries, the approach is pretty similar, because all of them are based on quantitative economic-wide models. But there is a very, very big spectrum of dates of adoption, which is already now 5 years from, almost 5 years from adopting the long-term strategies of Czech Republic, and it was obviously not done for compliance with the governance regulation, which was not yet done at the time of adopting this document. And for Poland, where we also have a work in progress, but courtesy of the Ministry of Development, we had some look to the Polish LTS, but as it is not finished yet, everything which is in reference to Polish strategy is rather indicative and subjected to change. But Wise Europe is doing some input work for these long-term strategies, so we had a chance to look at the process from inside. So that also affects the long-term strategies and their comparability, because they present a different level of ambitions and topicality due to dynamically changing climate policy in the European Union. So we also mapped the targets for 2030 and 2050 2030 is based on the NACP, and as many of you know, they are already outdated because they are there is a new target for 2030. Everyone knows Fit for 55 package, and also at the moment they were not really really ambitious anyway. So this has to change, and we also mapped the targets for 2050 from the long-term strategies. And none of the countries really set the targets for renewable energy share or energy efficiency. All we see it's only greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So the Hungary and Slovakia set the climate neutrality target. The Czech Republic was at the time the target was not set. So obviously it's not set in the long-term strategies either. And Poland is just showing the range of indicative targets. So this is how the scoreboard looks like for these first two categories. Essentially, this is what I said. There's a good coverage of guidelines laid out in the governance regulation. However, because of the lack of details in the framework, which could be more structured and specific as it is for NACP, it was not so difficult task to do. There are also different adoption times, and dynamically changing climate policy reduce the comparability of the strategies. There is also lack of interim. So for example, 2040 targets beyond the NACP, despite easy availability from modeling results. And also all the main indicators could be better covered, and LTS would benefit from the specific milestones for better clarity. So our colleagues from Ecologic did a really important piece of work of the importance of the indicators and setting the milestones for tracking the progress. So I invite you to take a look on that. But essentially, it provides better clarity, and it allows to track the progress, and it's also it's important for committing to the goal. As for the sectoral details, we found that there is overall good coverage of policies and measures for emission reduction, but there are significant difference in scope and level of details regarding the background data, the presentation of the modeling results, the scenario forecast, the range of indicators, the greenhouse gas inventory, and all of that. It's not covered that well as policies and measures. Hungary and Poland did really well in for first sectors, and also carbon removal technologies. And we found that there is overall modest details on agriculture and LULUCF compared to other sectors across the strategies. So we want to also stress out that the inconsistent structure of the sections across strategies, but also within them. Sorry. So for the financing and enabling policies and economic assessment, there is overall good coverage of the investment needs, which are based on modeling, but not a good coverage of financing possibilities, which are only covered from EU side, from EU funds. but not really from domestic funds and measures. And when we compare the investment needs and the financing possibilities, we found there is a financial gap which is not addressed in the long-term strategies, whether the money will come from private investments or from other funds. It should be more elaborated on that. And also there is a poor coverage of research and development sector and its financial possibilities. So what we would like to see, it's more prescriptive provisions, more policies and measures, maybe specific technologies addressed, and also the financing. And only Hungary really did well in this exercise or this category. For the economic assessment, Slovakia did the most comprehensive analysis of that. Really, Czech Republic didn't really had a separate section on that. So there is overall lack of more proactive policies and measures for mitigation of these negative impacts, even if they are mentioned or modeled in the long-term strategies. Then there is also lack of distributive impact assessment across all of them. So we just need to know how it is going to be distributed across the social groups and across the time. So Poland and Slovakia incorporated some details on this distribution, but Hungary and Czechia didn't do that. So last but not least, again, the strategy preparation and implementation. We assess the analytical tools used for the long-term strategies. All of the countries use this economy-wide modeling, which we found essential for supporting the policies and measures presented in the strategies. Czech Republic scored 2 here because they were using only 2050 calculator, which was developed by UK, and it's more of the estimates, but I'm sure that Mr. Dan Halka will say more about this, and I'm sure that in the coming update of Czech Republic strategy, the modeling will be more comprehensive. And there is also the national level governance framework set out in Czech Republic and Hungary long-term strategies. There is no available information about it in Poland, and there are some measures for Slovakia also. But what we found is that even if the framework is set, there is not a lot of information about the tools, which also should be essentially and should be incorporated in the long-term strategy. And last but not least, public consultation with Hungary, providing most opportunities for public and other relevant stakeholders to share the views and to shape the long-term strategy. And we have sadly no information about it from Polish side, because it's not done yet and not released yet. But also we have some public consultations for Czech Republic and Slovakia as well. So to sum it up, we think that the first wave of long-term strategies in Visegrád group countries showed the significant national capacities and the potential. But we also drew set of recommendations, which for this presentation I aggregated into four categories. Which first one is getting basics right, which means ensuring the readability and clarity using the consistent structure and the visual presentation. And we should also focus on taking advantage of economy-wide modeling by providing the targets and indicators. And we also should focus on appropriate level of ambitions and topicality of the long-term strategy. We should also improve poorly covered topics, which are basically financing, R&D sector, socioeconomic and distributive impacts, and agriculture and LULUCF sector. We need more EU level and regional action. From EU, we would like to see the better guidance and more specific framework for long-term strategies, more assistance as it is for national energy and climate plans. Maybe also providing the platform for knowledge exchange. All of these things can be also done on cooperation on regional level. And last but not least, strengthen the governance. Would like to see the more inclusive processes of creating the strategies. So including experts, the public consultations, and also by providing the transparent measures of monitoring of the progress and the implementation assessment process. So this is basically it from my side. For the next steps, we are going to prepare the assessment for other countries in the CEA region. And also we are preparing the thematic assessment of long-term strategies across the European Union. For example, we are going with the role of the gas, natural gas in the transition across all the EU countries. So looking forward to presenting that as well. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Krzysztof, for the presentation. I see that we have some initial reactions from the audience, but let me maybe just ask you a very brief question as one of the co-authors of the analysis. What would be your wished outcome of the project and the assessment of these strategies? Because we've seen that you put some quite significant work to analyze them across different dimensions. So what was the objective of doing it and pointing out some shortcomings and the best practices?
Of course. So we didn't really wanted to assess the countries and do it like more like the competition. What we wanted to show is the cross-cutting issues that that we see across the strategies, and that could be improved in the process of the update, because the first wave of these strategies didn't really had enough governance or the framework to become like really comprehensive long-term strategies. So our main goal is to make it better to prepare the countries for the updates by drawing these recommendations, and also by providing the platform for knowledge exchange in the CE region, in the Visegrád group, but also on the EU level.
Yeah, thank you. So I see that there are some questions emerging in the chat. If you could just also introduce them into the Q&A tool, it would be very helpful to have them in the one place. But Krzysztof, maybe you would also answer the question from the floor about the role of national parliaments and their involvement in adopting long-term strategies. And there's also the question about their publishing, whether it was government website only or also in some official journal. So if you analyzed it, please could you just say a few words?
So the long-term strategies are published on European Commission website, and if any of the maybe ecological colleagues can put the link, that would be appreciated. And as far as I am concerned, the parliaments, what do you mean by parliaments? The governments, or
like same for
European,
Poland. The national parliaments.
Yeah, so not sure about the Slovakian, Czechia, and Hungary, but in Poland, the process is not so inclusive for now, because it's not done yet, and it's more done in the isolation from the public and the parliament itself. I guess it's going to be widely commented when the draft is out.
Yeah, okay, thank you. There's also a question about the green public procurement and whether it was analyzed how this instrument can be used to support climate goals and plans, and what were the outcomes. So if you have anything to say about it, then go ahead.
Yeah, obviously green public procurement and all of the other financial mechanisms of transition, they are very important for the transition, but we didn't really assess the content and specific mechanisms. We were trying to focus on if there is any mechanisms addressed, and not going into details what is a better choice or worse choice. We leave it to the countries and maybe other assessments for that. But yes, personally, I think that the financial part of the long-term strategies could be improved. As I already said, there is a significant financial gap between the investment needs and the financial possibilities which are stated in the long-term strategies. So this is something which should be elaborated in the updates.
Yeah, thank you very much. I saw that in the meantime there was information in the Q&A about the Hungarian approach, that it was adopted only by the government without the involvement of parliament. So thank you for the presentation and the answers once again, Krzysztof. And maybe I will now move on to our panel discussion and ask some questions to our speakers. So maybe in alphabetical order, we'll begin with Czechia. Michal Danielka is with us, representing the Czech Ministry of Environment. As a government representative, I will take this opportunity to maybe ask the question related to this preparatory phase. We've seen that Czechia is they're assessed with some shortcomings, but that may be explained by the fact that Czech Republic was in fact pioneer in developing national long-term strategies. So if you could say a few words about the current status of the long-term strategy, whether it is updated, and what is the status of work. Also, we've seen that the Czech government is preparing to adopt new coal phase-out target and shift it forward by 5 years to 2033. So if you can also shed some light on how it will be reflected in the long-term strategy, it will be very interesting for us. So Mr. Danielka, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me for this panel, and Krzysztof for his excellent presentation. Maybe firstly to introduce myself shortly. I'm from the Czech Ministry of Environment, from the Department of Energy and Climate Protection, and I was very much involved in preparation of our long-term strategy, which is called the Climate Protection Policy of the Czech Republic, and we have adopted it already in 2017. In my view, the assessment of our long-term strategy is quite fair and comprehensive. I find this kind of comparison as quite useful, and there are some very good recommendations for further improvement of our strategy. Regarding some of the elements, I was even surprised that the Czech Republic scored higher than I expected. This is, for example, the case of adherence with the requirements of the governance regulation, which only came after the adoption of our long-term strategy, actually. Regarding the planned update of our policy, I'm pleased to say that from the beginning of this year, we have a new government, which has already reaffirmed in its policy statement the goal of presenting a new climate protection policy, which will take into account the new ambitious EU goals for 2030 and 2050. And this policy should be discussed by the government in 2023, so next year, together with the update of the state energy policy, which will be prepared in parallel. We expect that these documents should be adopted by the end of 2023, but there might be some slight delay. Later, these documents should also form the basis of the update of the National Energy and Climate Plan of the Czech Republic, which will be submitted later to the European Commission. So last year, we have, together with other ministries and stakeholders, prepared an evaluation of the climate protection policy from 2017, of which the government took note. And this was actually the first step of the update of our long-term strategy, and this evaluation also contains some specific recommendations for the update. Currently, we are intensively working on modeling new scenarios based on the Fit for 55 package and achieving climate neutrality by 2050. We should have some first results by May this year. And this modeling should also include some data on socio-economic and distributive impacts. And therefore, we expect improvement in these areas where we scored quite low according to the analysis. So maybe this is what I wanted to say to the first question. And I'm ready to some follow-up questions, and I can even take some questions from the floor.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe just to quickly follow up. Thank you very much for your response. So my question would relate to the cross-border cooperation in the process of preparing such a strategy, because we know that there are some politically sensitive issues actually between Poland and Czechia about the Turów lignite mine, for example, and we just maybe consider the opportunity to cooperate closely between governments in this phase of preparing the transformation in the long term as a method to avoid such misunderstandings. So if you could say a few words about your approach to cross-border cooperation and direct involvement with other like ministries from other countries, in particular neighboring ones, and what is your perspective on this? It will be very interesting for us.
Okay, so maybe I will start by saying that I have definitely found it quite useful to hear from colleagues from other countries about their experiences with preparing their long-term strategies. I have actually read the National Clean Development Strategy of Hungary and the Low Carbon Development Strategy of the Slovak Republic. I have not yet seen the Polish long-term strategy, which is still in preparation. So there are definitely some elements in these documents and in the comparative analysis which could serve as an inspiration for us for the update. We have quite close contacts, especially with colleagues from Slovakia, and we have already discussed our long-term strategies and exchanged some ideas during our bilateral meetings. It is true that one of the areas in which we see a need for improvement is also transparency. So we are planning to have a more comprehensive public consultation this time. And if the time and resources allow, we may also consult our strategy more with the neighboring countries. One possibility would be to use the opportunity to consult the long-term strategy together with the energy and climate plan, because there is already some discussion planned for this. So maybe we could do this together. Also, we definitely plan to have a specific chapter on international cooperation in the long-term strategy, as was already in the previous strategy, but we could elaborate on this much more. And we are also planning to list some international cooperation projects. But on the other side, so far, we have not been, let's say, in close contact with colleagues from other V4 states regarding the specifics of the policy, but we don't have a draft available so far, so this is too early for such an involvement, I think. But we should definitely plan something.
Yeah, thank you for this. And you mentioned that the closest cooperation in the preparation phase was with Slovakia. So maybe using this, I will switch to Katerina Hajdiakova from Slovakia, Climate Initiative Slovakia, and representing civil society side today. So Katerina, if you could tell us about your assessment of the Slovakian long-term strategy and whether you agree with the conclusions that were presented by Krzysztof in this respect, and how do you see the process of preparing the strategy in Slovakia and the final outcome? Sorry, we cannot hear you. Are you muted, or is there any other technical problems? Sorry, we still cannot hear you. So maybe I will go then to Stelios and get back to you, Katerina, in a few minutes. Okay, so Stelios Grafakos is representing Global Green Growth Institute and was involved in the process of preparing Hungarian, but not only Hungarian, long-term strategy. So maybe Stelios, you could guide us through some of the methodological approach that you adopted for the Hungarian document, and say a few words about this this side of the exercise, and how do you see the cooperation between your organization and government in this respect?
Thank you, Wojciech. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity here to share the experiences of supporting the government of Hungary to develop its long-term strategy. So it's a great pleasure to be here and also to listen the outcomes of the analysis that was conducted. And I would like to congratulate you for that. I think the event is very timely and very much needed. So I'm very happy to be here today. So briefly, for those that they don't know, the Global Green Growth Institute is a treaty-based intergovernmental organization with around 40 member and partner countries around the world. And we aim to support our member and partner countries to follow an economic model based on green growth, which is also socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable. So we had the opportunity to support the government of Hungary to develop its LTS. And I have to say here, as you highlighted, we are currently supporting 9 countries to develop globally to develop their LTS. So we could also draw some comparative outcomes from our experience, but I will focus obviously on the process engaging with the government of Hungary. So in essence, our role as organization was to support the government. So from the beginning, the government was at the driving seat. We were there, the trusted advisor to support on the organization of the stakeholders consultation. We developed and we brought together a modeling team that consisted both of international modeling experts on macroeconomic analysis, but also national experts in the different sectors that they were covered in the LTS. So that was an interesting modeling exercise. And in addition to that, we had a continuous engagement with the government. And I would like to highlight here that the responsible department was the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, the Secretariat on Climate Policy, that from the beginning till the end was engaged through the process and led the whole process. We utilized a few principles also that we think those are important for a successful development of a long-term strategy. So I would like to highlight here that GGGI has staff on the ground. So our staff is sitting with the different ministries in the countries we support. So our staff was sitting at the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. So we had the opportunity to work very closely with the government officers. So that was one ingredient to really also to enhance the ownership of the process by the government. We also tried to enhance the participatory and inclusive process of the LTS, as you mentioned, and as your analysis has highlighted. We organized 3 consultation workshops for different actors and stakeholders to engage and provide feedback and validation of the different scenarios. And the MIT, the ministry, also initiated and organized the so-called climate breakfast. In essence, was a regular meeting with the private sector in the different fields of the LTS, like energy, transport, waste management, agriculture, forestry, so on and so forth. And lastly, another important element that also touches upon the methodological approach, which was more an integrated modeling, having a macroeconomic analysis, a system dynamics approach, and sectoral modeling analysis with national experts and modelers from Hungary, where the sectoral analysis fed into the macroeconomic modeling in an iterative process. So, for instance, GDP was endogenously generated by the macroeconomy model, was fed back to the sectoral model. So we had these feedback loops, which I think was really necessary to try to better reflect the scenarios. In addition to that, an important aspect was that we wanted, and that was the interest from the government, to make sure that these models will remain at the disposal for the government officers to be able to use them. So we developed a training, we conducted a training very targeted on the macroeconomic modeling based on system dynamics, a full-fledged week where different government officers, more technical staff was engaged. So there was a lot of interest and engagement. So we are very happy with that, and hopefully the models and the overall approach could be further utilized for revising further and updating the LTS in the coming years, or running scenarios for the Fit for 55 package. So for the sake of time, I think I could elaborate more, but I will stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Stelios, for this interesting insight. There was a question from the floor, which I also wanted to ask, so I will take this opportunity to use your experience in working with various governments in preparing their long-term strategies. So first, how do you see the role of such a document in the public policy architecture? So what are the benefits of having such a long-term analysis of various scenarios? And there was also one question related specifically to Hungary and the legal commitment to achieve climate neutrality on the state level by 2050, which was adopted in June 2020. So maybe you could also say what was the role of this legislation in the process, not only the national level, at the national level, not only the regulatory requirements stemming from the EU level. So floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for these questions, both very relevant and very good questions. So on the value of long-term strategies, I think the science is clear. Based on the IPCC report, we have consensus on the scientific side that we should, if we want to keep the increase of Earth's average temperature up to 1.5 degrees of Celsius, which is considered safe, then we should bend the curve of our emissions and reach climate neutrality, net zero emissions by 2050. So the question, a big question mark, is how we get there. So we have heard from different countries pledging to reach net zero emissions, but the question is how we go there. So often we see political statements that sometimes are not backed up with the necessary roadmaps to see how we can reach there, how we can decarbonize the different sectors of the economy. So in that sense, the LTS is a very valuable and strategic document, because this is a strategic document that governments could really see, explore different pathways, how to reach to net zero emissions, what kind of opportunities will be through this decarbonization process, what kind of challenges, and how to approach them. So I think it's a great value having these strategic documents, not just to submit to the UNFCCC, but also to really guide the decarbonization and the net zero carbon development of the countries. On the second point, on the climate neutrality that was incorporated in law in Hungary, I think that's a great signal in terms of clear policy. So policymakers in all sectors have clear indication about where the country should go. So I think this provides a stable policy environment where investments can flow in. Obviously, a stable policy environment in that sense is a prerequisite for private sector investments to decarbonize the economy. With regard to the LTS, obviously we had to work around the net zero emissions target. So a kind of backcasting exercise. We explored different pathways how to reach the net zero emissions. We had the early action and the late action scenario, and depending on the socioeconomic benefits of those two pathways, that we selected the early action. The government selected, with our support, the early action pathway to reach net zero emissions by 2015.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stelios. We can see that there is, in the process of elaborating long-term strategies, we have various stakeholders active. We have government, we have experts from intergovernmental organizations or NGOs, as was the case in Poland, as Krzysztof presented. So maybe I will now go back to Krzysztof, because we are still waiting for Katarina to rejoin us, and ask you about the lessons that could be learned from the process that was presented by Stelios and also by Michał for the final phase of Polish strategy. If you could give us a little bit more information about recommendations that are contained in the report, and what should be the approach to public consultations in this process. From your view and your perspective, it would be very nice to hear.
Thank you very much. Yeah, what Stelios just said, and Michał just earlier, it seems that Czech Republic and Hungary already, Czech Republic already did a really good job ahead of the update of the strategy, and it seems that they had really lessons learned from the first strategy they adopted. And what Stelios said is it's really comprehensive, just wow. So congratulations on the Hungary strategy, because as you can see on the assessment, it seems like the best and most comprehensive one by now. What recommendations we can draw from this is, because Polish, as you can see in the assessment, we as Poland, we are going to use the primes model. So quality-wise, it's for sure from the modeling perspective, it's going to be good. But what is important for us is that we would like to see more inclusive process. What was already brought up in this discussion. So there are more involvement from public, the parliament even, or more involvement from the experts and NGOs in the process of shaping the strategy. Obviously, too much voices is also not the best, because obviously the administration has a certain capacity. So too much things, too much noise, it's also not good. But yeah, the situation which we have so far, it's far from the optimal point, because really there is no public consultations whatsoever right now. I hope this will change because, as I said, the Poland is still in the process. So hopefully we see more of that in the future.
Yeah, thank you. So staying a little bit longer with you now, we have some questions from the floor related to the coal to gas shift, and as a person who is responsible for the analysis of LTS through the gas perspective, I think you are the best to answer it. So the exact wording of the question is that, is coal to gas going to put the net zero trajectory of the region in jeopardy? And there's also one question related to the role of nuclear energy in the region. So maybe you could give some answer about the role of these two sources of energy in the LTS and the future energy mix.
Yeah, so that's a really valid but also very difficult question. I think we should rely more on the modeling. So what we can or can't do. As we can see, there are also models of net zero, which are not including the nuclear energy. We are seeing the modeling, which is showing that gas can be the transition fuel. Of course, everything needs to be put in the perspective and the context of Polish national capacities, the investment needs, and know-how which we have. Poland is preparing the national nuclear energy plan and implementations. We want to finish has a operational nuclear power plant in 2033. It's going to be tight, not going to lie here. And also we can see that we have this switch from coal to gas. Yeah, basically it's very difficult to assess if it's going to jeopardize the net zero target itself. Obviously, the overdoing the capacity of gas and too much reliance on this, it's not going to be good for the climate, because hey, it's a emissive fossil fuel, right? Yeah, but at the same time, from the other side, it's half less emissive than coal. And we are really, we have a really carbon intensive electricity generation and heat generation as well. So yeah, we need to level that for sure, and just watch out for not overdoing the capacities in gas in terms of the electricity and heat generation.
Yeah, thank you. I guess there will be some more information included in the further reports and projects as well about this topic, which is obviously highly relevant, as we could also see from the debate surrounding the taxonomy and labeling gas and nuclear as transitional energy sources. So leaving aside this topic for a moment, I would come back to Michał, and ask you the question from the floor, because we could see that the new Czech government promised in its programs to quoting set guidelines for achieving the 2050 climate neutrality goal. And there's a question coming from Jakub Groszkowski. How far is this declaration from a formal commitment to achieve climate neutrality by by Czechia by 2050? So what is the exact meaning of this declaration of the program declaration of the government? And maybe you could also tell us how the process of updating Czech strategy is running in relation to the targets that, and their increase and adjustment for example, renewable energy heating or power generation.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Regarding the questions on the promise of our new government to set the guidelines for achieving the 2050 neutrality goal, this is a very interesting question also for us, because we don't know much more than this sentence so far. Our government is quite new, and we don't know if the decision will be to fully commit to carbon neutrality by 2050. But we certainly hope so, and it will be our recommendation to have such a target. So it will also depend on the results of the modeling, probably. I think that the government would like to see, especially the economic analysis of the transition. So we have something to go on, and we will need to wait for the final decision still.
Okay, thank you. There's also one question related to the policy impact of the strategies. As you mentioned in your previous intervention, you are simultaneously working on updating long-term strategy and national energy and climate plan. So maybe you could say a few words about your perspective as a representative of administration on the relation between those two documents, because as Krzysztof mentioned, the NECPs are much regulated in much more detailed way than LTS in the governance regulation itself, but it seems that they are also much more prominent politically and policy wise. So if you could say a few words about your perspective on the relationship between NECPs and LTS in planning of the transformation.
So we are definitely very much trying to keep these documents in line, and there is quite a good cooperation between our ministry and the Ministry of Industry and Trade, which was established during the preparation of our long-term strategy and the NECP. So we have something to build on already, and this is also connected to the question on, let's say, the targets for renewables and energy efficiency. We already have some early estimates from the Ministry of Industry and Trade what these targets should be according to the new legislation, and we will incorporate these targets into the modeling which is being done. We were asked by the modelers to provide these provisional numbers, so we have done so, and it will be already included in the modeling, and it should be also in line what will be probably presented in the NECP, but this could for sure be later changed during the preparation of the NECP. But we already have some preliminary estimates.
Sure, thank you very much. I remember from my experience of working in public administration, there was a debate about which document should guide which one. So whether the LTS should be aligned to the NECP path or the long-term strategy should be the base for setting the targets in NECP. So I guess this is the question that many governments are asking themselves, how to respond to this challenge.
Yes,
so
in the previous NECP, actually all the climate targets were taken from the climate protection policy, but for sure in other chapters there was also some very important interaction of the policies, so this was much more difficult to incorporate. Yes, and there the energy policy of the Czech Republic was seen as the primary source mostly.
Yeah, thank you. Stelios, do you have any thoughts about this topic of the relations between NSCPs and long-term strategies?
Yes, that's a very good question. And indeed, it's important the governments to try, obviously, to align those policy documents, the short to medium term with the long term. When we talk about the value of the LTS, I think if the development of an LTS is based on a robust and sound approach, participatory, so on and so forth, addressing also issues of implementation and finance, and demonstrating that reaching net zero emissions by 2050 is feasible, and illustrating the pathway to reach that target, then I guess this could steer the development of the short-term and medium-term NECPs, or at the international level, the national determined contributions that are expected to be revised every 5 years. So I think it's an iterative process. So I think it's important to have ambitious, sound LTS, which could guide and steer the revision cycle of the NECPs and the NDCs. They should be fully aligned, and they could really align the long-term net zero emissions targets with short-term action. So in that sense, I think that's possible. It's an important for consistency and alignment of these documents and overall short-term and long-term climate policy of the countries.
Yeah, thank you. So just to remind to everyone that we still have some 10 minutes of the discussion left. So if you wish to ask any question, please use Q&A tool. And Stelios, I guess this question that was asked by someone anonymous could be also relevant for you. So the question is about the potential integrated planning and what could be the areas of such integrated planning in the future, where neighboring countries might benefit from not having to find net zero solutions by themselves. So what is the potential of cross-border cooperation in adopting maybe not the joint documents, but also the documents that would have the perspective not limited only to the national borders?
Excellent point. And talking here about the V4 countries and the region, I think it's important as a next step to see on the implementation side, what are the, let's say, more integrated cross-national solutions. I think, and this event and this analysis that has been generated by the consortium, I think it's very relevant in that sense. I could think of different fields that certainly cross-national cooperation in the region will be important and may generate some comparative advantages. For instance, e-mobility. We know that in all countries there automobile industries. So eventually, innovation on e-mobility could be something that could drive innovation, generation of jobs. I think that could be one field for cross-sectoral cooperation. Another one could be related to connectivity and development of international railway corridors. There is a good example for the Baltic railway corridor, which connects Helsinki to Warsaw. This could be extended, for instance, and improve the international railway system across the countries, and could also reach even at the Western Balkans. So there are fields related to the decarbonization of the countries and the economies that certainly will require cooperation between the countries, and of course exchange of knowledge. This is very important. There are common challenges. So around just transition policies, right? Obviously, there will be regions in all countries that will be affected by the decarbonization, phasing out coal. So how the transition fund has been utilized in different countries in an effective and efficient way. All those lessons learned across the countries as very important to support policies for decarbonizing the economies. Just transition policies is important. Finance-related policies, we have a good example in Hungary on green bonds, issuing green bonds to share this knowledge and experience. We have good examples in the Czech Republic utilizing revenues from the EU ETS to energy efficiency buildings to share this experience and learn. So I think there is plenty of space. There is a lot of potential to learn from each other and collaborate. And last point that I would like to make here is also, we're talking about climate change, which is a global issue, right? So it's important to be active also at the international level, support other countries that they're under the process of development, and they will in the near future develop fast, to make sure that they follow a low carbon or net zero carbon development pathway. So funding and supporting countries like in the Balkans, for instance, or in low-income countries, I think is imperative to make sure that nobody is left behind. And this is, as we say for COVID, we are safe if everyone is safe. So a similar analogy could be for climate change. So it should be an action taking at the global level.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stelios. I very much agree with what you just said, and thank you for bringing this just transition aspect into the discussion. And we've seen that all the countries actually could have some room for improvement in the area of social impact and distributive impacts of their long-term strategies. So this is certainly the area in which more focus is still needed, and I hope that it will be reflected in the upcoming work. So the final question to all of you, because I see that there are no more questions in the Q&A, would be about your expectations and wishes maybe about the future involvement of the European Commission and the role of the EU in the process of updating or revising long-term strategies. Do you see, for example, the need for revision of the governance regulation and setting up the coherent framework as Krzysztof presented, or the coordination? What would be the your expectations for coordination of the European Commission. So maybe Krzysztof, starting with you, then coming to Michał, and the final word for Stelios.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Of course, as we state in the report, we would like to see more coordination or more specific guidelines from European Commission. Now it's going to be much more easier because we can see how the countries approach their long-term strategies, and we can through this variety of approaches, we can really draw and combine all of these approaches, best practices to see how we really can do these long-term strategies. But also, I would like to see more governance, and this. I also fully agree with what Stelios said about regional cooperation and the transfer of knowledge. So the European Commission and European Union can provide the platform for this knowledge exchange. Will further extend the quality because climate crisis does not recognize borders. And then we can further extend this impact to non-EU countries and the least development countries. So yeah, there is like we said, there is really so much issues going on regarding the long-term strategies and the energy sector, transportation, agriculture, LULUCF, the industry. So to sum it up, it's very important to have one comprehensive structure which we can follow, the indicators, the governance. So all of these things can be done with long-term strategies, and I hope to see more guidance on that from the European Commission and obviously more involvement on the international level. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Then the final sentences from Michał and Stelios. Please keep it shortly, as we are running out of time.
Okay, so to be short, I have provided a very short answer to this question already in the chat. So maybe to summarize, in my view, maybe the guidance for NECPs was too prescriptive, let's say, and we had problems, especially with the outline, which was not maybe fully logical according to us, and we would like to structure some topics, let's say, differently to make the links more clear. So this was probably too much, but we are not against having some more guidance on the long-term strategies as such. I think it could be useful, and let's say that then these strategies will be also more comparable at the EU level.
Thank you. Stelios?
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with what the previous speaker said, so I'm not going to repeat that. Just a couple of things. A coherent framework and guidance from the EU will be needed. So we have this discrepancy providing support for the NECPs and LTS. So a more coherent, less prescriptive framework, as was highlighted, will be important. Knowledge platform, providing support whenever needed, and guidance is important. And lastly, one more issue. We know we have the Horizon Europe program, which covers and funds research. I think here we could also expect the European Commission to emphasize the bridge between research and policy. Also in the context of the LTS, we see that there is a lot of technical work that should be done, a lot of modeling, robust and sound. So certainly, good research is needed to bridge theory to practice and make sure that all these modeling exercises are incorporated in the LTS in the right way.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for the discussion and for previous presentation, and also to all participants. I would very much like to thank you for your attendance, active participation, and spending the last 1.5 hours with us. I'm pretty sure that you could find extremely insightful and interesting takeaways here from the process of elaborating on long-term strategies and their role in the public policy architecture. And I guess that we could discuss those issues for another 1.5 hours. So there is still plenty to work on. And I once again remind you that there will be upcoming researches and reports from our side. So please stay tuned and stay with us, visit our social media and webpage, and see you next time. And also very much thank you to the project team, so Eva, Johannes, and Matthias, for doing the preparatory work and ensuring that everything runs smoothly today. Thank you very much, it's really appreciated. So see you next time.